Welcome to the Shred Spot. This is my warehouse where I create all kinds of features and then I do tutorials and live streams. And today I have something really special for you. We're gonna learn manuals, but not just manuals. We're gonna hack the process to learn manuals way faster. I figured out a way to teach you how to do it. And hey man, sorry I'm late. What's that? Oh, I'm ready. Yeah man, we have a lot of work to do today though. I don't know if we're gonna have time. Well, I could probably help. I mean, I have to build, we've gotta paint, we've gotta do a tutorial. Maybe next week. Oh, right, yeah. As promised, we are gonna hack the manual today. Now, what is a manual? For those of you who don't know, a manual is like a wheelie without pedaling. You're coasting along in your back wheel, no pedals, just holding it up on the back wheel, and you just go as long as you have momentum and speed. To learn a manual quickly, you need to have some sort of downhill slope, because what you wanna do is keep your momentum up. And when you're manualing and first learning to manual, you're using your brake a lot. So if you have a downhill slope and you're using your brake, it'll kind of balance out the effects. If you're going on flat ground, you're not gonna manual that far. If you touch your brakes, you lose your momentum and then the whole thing is over, you have to start over. The first thing we need to do is build a feature that has a bit of an angle to it that would resemble a steep driveway or a downhill road. And for that, I'm gonna have to call on my friend Evan to help me out.
Now comes my favorite part of every build in the Shred Spot, a visit from the Primer Gremlins.
You voted on the community tab, I listened. Real red is the final call for this ramp. I had one special tie-breaking vote as well. I would like to introduce you to Little Red Riding Ramp. This one was actually named on the Twitch stream by Teracis. He came up with the idea after we decided it was gonna be red, we needed a kind of a cool name for it, and he came up with that one. So thanks Teracis for the help on this one. If you join on the live streams also on Twitch, you can see us ride a lot of this stuff ahead of time. Now that we have this ramp built, we can actually go into learning how to manual down it. And we're gonna learn a trial style way of doing it. Now, as a trials rider, you can hop on the back wheel. And if you can't, I'll link below to a video that will teach you how to do it. But you should be able to hop on the back wheel, and that will give you a really great feeling for where the back wheel balance point is. I think that a lot of people that are trying to learn manuals are really struggling to just get to the balance point, to feel out that balance point, because not only do they have to lift the front wheel up, but then they have to somehow catch the right balance point along the way, and they can loop out where the back wheel shoots out, or they can't get the front wheel up far enough. And so as a trials rider, you can already kind of leapfrog that process by getting up onto your back wheel on an angle like this. And once you're on your back wheel, it's just a matter of slowly letting off your brakes and letting the back wheel slide down as you go. And so the trial style of learning a manual, the short version, is to get to an angle like this, hop on your back wheel, slowly let your back wheel out just a little bit. And so you're just easing off the brake and keeping your finger over the lever, but you're easing off that back brake and letting the bike roll in front of you. Now you're already like 95% of the way there for a short manual, and all you have to do is make sure you stay in that position. You can bend your knees down a little bit more, but you're pretty much there. You can make micro adjustments, but you're in the right position, you're over your back wheel balance point. You've done all the hard work. And once you've learned this, you can then go back to the usual manual practice where you're trying to lift up that front wheel, and you'll know exactly where that balance point and what it's supposed to feel like. And once you know what it feels like and you've got this motion with momentum sorted out, getting through the rest of getting into position for the manual like a traditional rider would will be way easier because you actually know what you're looking for. I think that's the hardest thing, is to know what you're looking for. So many people are trying to do the lift up and they're trying to sit down into the balance point and then they're trying to keep their momentum the whole time. There's so much that goes on in a manual, and the best part about trials is that you can break it down into these little bits. So you can get up onto your back wheel, which is most of the battle right there. You can feel what it's like to move along on your back wheel at speed, which is the second part of it. All you then have to do is lock those in up here, pull up into it, and you're manualing. Okay, so it's not as simple as just let go of the back brake and you can automatically manual. Let me tell you a couple elements to manualing that are really important. One of the things I like to think about is making my body as wide as possible. And so I will actually put my elbows out and I'll also put my knees out. In the same way that we use our hips and our knees to move when we're on a balance line, we're doing the same thing on a manual. I'll usually sit down a little bit more than I traditionally would if I was on my back tire, and I'll push my knees out a little bit. And those knees keep the bike kind of balanced when it's up on the back wheel. Sometimes you bring your knees in, sometimes you bring your knees out, but you'll use those to keep you in balance as you're going along. I also feel like having your elbows out gives you a little bit more room to move the handlebars back and forward while you're on the back wheel. Just kind of keeping it loose with your knees and arms bent will just make you have a bit more control over the manual in general. Let's talk about brakes. What we're doing during a manual is called feathering the brakes, and feathering is just a light touch of the brakes to keep the bike in check. So if your front wheel comes up just a little bit too high, you just feather the brake a little bit, it'll bring your front wheel back down. And doing that along the way is going to kind of keep you in check. Now, the reason why we learn on an obstacle like this or any kind of downhill slope is to help you keep your momentum going. If you're riding along on flat and you feather the brakes, you're going to lose a lot of momentum as you're learning it. If you do it on a downhill, you will lose momentum, but the downhill keeps you going. It helps keep the momentum happening. So as you go, you're feathering this back brake. Front brake, you don't necessarily need to have on or off. There are BMXers that can manual forever with no front brake even installed on their bike, so it's more of a personal preference thing. Some people like to lock it up. I just kind of leave it and whatever happens, happens. The back brake feathering though, obviously if you're going to touch your back brake, it's going to affect your momentum. So the less you use your brake, the better you'll eventually be at manuals, the farther you'll be able to go. But don't be afraid to use it. You know, if that front wheel starts coming up or you start, moving a little bit faster than you're comfortable, that's where we feather it in. You don't want to just grab the brake because the whole bike goes cack, cack, and the front wheel slaps down super hard. So just slowly let it in and you'll be good to go. One thing I do want to say, although I did build a feature here that's about 2 feet wide, you probably want to practice on something a bit wider so you can bail. So one of the main things when people are learning manuals, they actually loop out quite a bit where the back wheel shoots out in front of them. Maybe they get a little bit too much momentum, they pull up too far. Ideally, learning it like this as trial style, you won't loop out as much, but it does take a little bit of practice to get it right. So do it on something that's like a downhill road or a really wide ledge. For me, I'm confident doing manuals, so I don't have a lot of room on either side here, but I would say give yourself as much room possible. Expect that you're gonna have to jump off the back of the bike. It's no big deal. Manuals take a little bit to get that fine back wheel balance mastered, but at the same time, if you can hop on your back wheel, this is already going to be a lot easier for you than most people. Manuals are also kind of one of these tricks where you never totally master it and it's perfect and locked in every single time, but you can for sure get better the more you do it over and over and over again. So that's why I have now a new manual feature in this place, but this is also a great trick that you can practice from point A to point B. Whenever you're on a ride or going somewhere or in a parking lot or whatever, you can just practice your manuals, get more and more comfortable on it. They adapt to basically every single bike that you ride. I manual my mountain bike all the time when I'm out on the trail, and it's just a fun skill to have. It's great back wheel control. It's even better on your trials bike. So yeah, just give it a shot on everything you do and do it as much as you possibly can. It's something you can practice from point A to point B. You can practice all kinds of different variations. You can practice bunny hopping up to stuff and landing in manual position. You can practice jumping into a manual. There's all kinds of different stuff you can do, and that's what kind of makes manuals fun. It's just this matter of locking in on what that balance point feels like, which is why we learned it from the back wheel today. As you learn this trick, you may just want to start with really slow and short manuals. Just get a feeling for letting off that back brake and then pulling it back, and then letting off the back brake and pulling it back. You don't need to do a 2-mile long manual on your first go by any means. Just get it started, get a good feel for that balance point. You've already got most of the work done because you're on the back wheel, and now you can kind of experiment and play with it until you get really confident on that back wheel and on top of that balance point. One thing I want to add, and we talk about it when we talk about hopping on the back wheel, but your hips play a big role in your balance over that balance point. So you want to think about not only getting into that balance point, but getting your hips over it. And you'll see me a lot of times when I manual, my hips are moving backwards and forwards, and that's to keep my center of gravity over the balance point of the bike. So your hips are probably the MVP when it comes to actually riding manuals and staying on top of that balance point. Be real conscious of your hips and your knees as you're kind of rolling along. You'll notice that if you pay attention to those, your manualing will become a lot easier. If you have questions on this technique, join us Tuesdays and Thursdays for live streams. I do a lot with this new ramp now that I've got it in the space, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. Thanks again for watching this, and please consider subscribing if you haven't already.
It didn't move.
And then we can try it the other way.
There you go.